Okay, so we are now live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Agile in a Crisis. Thank you for joining us. Agile is touted as one of the best, most important work methodologies in existence. But how does it apply during a pandemic? In what ways is it relevant through a crisis like the one we're facing? Prior to the current pandemic, Agile's irresistible rise in terms of both popularity and adoption showed no signs of slowing down. Some of the benefits of working in an agile fashion include smaller, faster failures, happier employees, reduced costs, and greater transparency. A lot of these benefits sound really useful in the situation we're in. So we thought we'd invite two experienced agile practitioners to discuss how the agile teams they work with have coped during the lockdown, and whether Agile's principles have been useful in helping them and their clients overcome the unforeseen challenges we're all facing. The format of this event will see Zuhlke's Kev Murray give a lightning talk for 15 minutes, followed by Lawrence Diath from Engine Transformation. We'll then be posing your questions to both speakers before breaking off into some networking. So please, as the talks are taking place, feel free to drop your questions in the chat function, and I'll pick them up and speak with the speakers about them during the Q&A at the end. Also, if you haven't taken part in a Hopin networking session, we really do advise that you stick around. We've had a lot of great feedback on the platform. So for now, Lawrence and I will turn off our cams and hand over to Kev.
Thanks, Michael. So I'll share my screen now. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. So good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be supporting Manchester Digital with a lightning talk about how here at Zuhlke we're coping in the current crisis. So a little bit about me before we start. So apologies, no corporate mugshots. I've put a running picture because running is keeping me sane during these times. So my role at Zuhlke is I'm the regional director for the North, based here in Manchester. I've been at Zuhlke for 7 months. I'm really enjoying the experience, but I have been working with Agile teams for 21 years. I've also been part of the Manchester Digital community for the past 5 years, 5 years-ish. And if anybody wants to contact me about this talk, it is a lightning talk, so I'm going to be touching on some topics, not going into the detail. There isn't enough time for that. But if you want to email me or contact me on Twitter, please feel free to do so. So my lightning talk today will cover 3 high-level topics. So in this current climate, how at Zuhlke are we adapting to look after delivery, look after each other, and most importantly, and the bit that people maybe don't do as well, is just look after yourself.
Just shut the door, please.
So as this is a webinar, an online conference, it's difficult to have the interaction with the audience. So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what Agile is, but I'll try and summarize it in 3 words, which is Agile is about adapting to change. And I love this quote from W.E. Deming, which is, it's not necessary to change. Survival isn't mandatory. And to go a little bit deeper about Agile, and this is my last slide to tell people what Agile is. Agile is really about feedback, and that's the key thing, is feedback from your users. You want to make sure you're delivering early and iteratively, but you want to do it the right way. You want to make sure that you've got collaborative teams and not silos. You want to make sure you've got continuous delivery, not big bang releases. Make sure that it's test driven. Quality is absolutely paramount. And for us at Zuhlke, these agile principles are yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just found out there's been a technical difficulty, so people on the stage weren't seeing it. It's working again now, but could you please go back to the start?
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Sorry about that, Kev.
No problem. Okay, so adapting to change. Here we go. So good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be supporting Manchester Digital with a lightning talk about how we're coping here at Zuhlke in the current crisis. So a little bit about me first. So I don't have a corporate mugshot to share. I've put a running picture because running is really keeping me sane during the current situation. So my role, I'm the regional director for the North, based here in Manchester for Zuhlke. I've been at Zuhlke for 7 months and really enjoying the mission that we're on here. Fantastic at the moment. I've got 21 years of Agile delivery, and I've been very lucky to be working closely with the Manchester Digital team for the last 5 years. My talk today is going to be touching on a number of subjects. As it's a lightning talk, I can't go into too much detail, but if you have any questions after this session, please feel free to email me or contact me on Twitter. So my talk today is, my lightning talk today will cover 3 topics. I'm going to be touching on how in this current climate here at Zuhlke, we are adapting to looking after delivery. How also in these very strange times we're looking after each other, and most importantly, looking after yourself. As this is an online webinar, it's difficult to sort of sense the crowd and talk to the crowd. So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what Agile is or everyone is an Agile expert, but I'll try and describe it in 3 words, which is adapting to change. And I love this quote from W.E. Deming, which is, "It's not necessary to change. Survival isn't mandatory." I think that's very, very key. A little bit low-level detail, particularly when it comes to delivery. Agile is about building the right thing and building the thing right. So it's really important to make sure that you have regular, frequent feedback from your users, not managers, but your users. And you want to do that by delivering early and delivering iteratively and through sessions like user research and user feedback. But you've also got to do it the right way. You've got to do it with collaborative, multidisciplinary teams or cross-functional teams. You can't do it in silos. You've got to make sure that you're focusing on continuous delivery, not big bang delivery. And you've got to make sure quality is paramount and understood, and make sure you're testing first. So these principles, these key Agile principles are really helping us at Zuhlke. It's very important that we understand adapting to change, collaboration, regular feedback loops, continuous delivery, continuous improvement. Those principles are really helping us here at Zuhlke. So I'm actually going to describe a situation that sort of kept me quite busy over the last 2 months. So at the beginning of the year, we were looking to start a discovery phase for a new customer. And as the ever-changing situation was moving more and more likely to becoming a lockdown, at the beginning of March, our key stakeholder said, right, can we do this discovery session fully remote? Now, again, I don't want to assume everybody knows what discovery is. So a very simple high-level overview. A discovery phase is, before you actually start writing any code, you need to understand, should we do this? Can we do this? And how do we do this? And what we did is, because we'd actually designed a discovery, a 5-day duration discovery that was all about being face-to-face in front of whiteboards, post-it notes, we were including about 20 different stakeholders, and it was all set up. And we had to effectively pivot and adapt to the change of, how do we do this discovery completely remote and still have all the stakeholder engagement and try and achieve all the same outcomes that we needed to do? So what we did is, first thing I did is start to do a little bit of research, not being arrogant. Other people must be running remote workshops and remote discoveries. As we were moving more and more into lockdown, there was loads of great blogs coming out from people who were moving into remote working, and you could get lots of great insights. And what I noticed was one of my ex-colleagues who had moved on to a more global organization. She was actually doing remote workshops quite regularly. This wasn't new to her. So I spoke to Josephine to find out how they got on, understand the challenges that they have as this big global company run sessions on different continents. The main bit of advice was timings are everything. It's very important to understand that when you're doing things remotely, they can take twice as long. You can't just come into a room, get everybody around the whiteboard and just run a session like story mapping really easily. Running story mapping remotely was quite complicated. So one of the key things we did is make sure that we allocated more time for these sessions, but also in terms of timings, you got to make sure that you're ensuring people are not stuck in front of their screen constantly for too long. So making sure the sessions are 90-minute maximum. You know, if you're running a workshop over a full day, making sure you've got plenty of breaks, making sure you're not starting too early and you're finishing on time is very, very key. Running workshops remotely is actually complicated. So you need to make sure you prepare properly and you practice. One of the challenging things we wanted to do is getting different stakeholders involved in story mapping to really define the minimum viable product and come up with a roadmap was quite difficult. It's hard enough actually doing it when you're in the same room. Doing it remotely needed a lot of practice. So, you know, we prepared and we ran trial sessions, including people from the customers team, to make sure the technology, the techniques, the facilitation was all working. Before we risked wasting the time of getting 20 people into a virtual room, we made sure it worked for 5 people properly. One of the key things we did to make sure things worked was create a code of conduct. There's a lot of great blogs out there of rules of engagement. I don't like that word, but, you know, rules of how to sort of behave in online meetings. What we did is we made sure it was co-created with the wider team, and we made it consumable and small, but we split it into 3 sections. So there was effectively some guide and code of conduct for what you needed to do before the meeting. You know, obviously things like making sure you've got a headset, because if you don't have a headset and microphone, the background noise can be quite disruptive. We had a small code of conduct co-written by the team for during the session, you know, making sure that, you know, if you're not talking, please be on mute. And also, if someone does that, you know, that regular thing of talking while they're still on mute, don't make fun of them. It's sort of, it happens to all of us. We also had a code of conduct for the facilitators. And I say facilitators because when you're running a remote session like this, it's very key that you work in pairs for facilitation. It's really daunting to do this by yourself, and having someone to buddy up with or take over if your home internet connection crashes is very, very, very important. My colleague who talked about timings being everything, she also helped me because she was a graduate from Hyper Island. She pointed me at the Hyper Island toolkit. And one of the great tools that they have, which I borrowed or stole, whatever you want to say, is something called IDOART. And this is an acronym to make sure that everybody is properly prepared going into the workshop. So the acronym stands for intention. Make sure everybody understands the purpose of the workshop. Desired outcomes. Make sure everybody knows what you're aiming to achieve in the workshop. Workshop roles, making sure everybody knows what role they're playing. You've got the facilitator, the pairing facilitator, somebody scribing or taking notes, and also for the participants, making sure that they know that, you know, if it's an interactive session, that they're participating, not just passively listening. You also want to have some rules, which is effectively our code of conduct, and T stands for timings, which I've already touched on. You know, they're very key. Getting the facilitation and the technology is right is so important. Don't take it for granted that everybody, you know, particularly if it's different organizations, can use your preferred video conferencing tool. We actually realized that because of firewall challenges, we had to use Zoom and not Teams. So making sure that all the preparation beforehand was all in Teams. And, you know, if you're doing a session for a relatively long period of time, make it fun, make it interactive. Discovery and project liftoff, you tend to find that people are meeting each other for the first time. So invest a lot of time in actually getting to know each other, because that element of human interaction is so key to the success. And each situation is different. And what I've really relished is actually sharing my experiences and learning from other people as they share theirs. The outcomes of this 5-day discovery was key. So I've sort of redacted key information here so you can't see the customer, but this is what day 1 looks like. So we were able to send this out to people 2 weeks in advance so they knew what they were letting themselves in for. As you can see, we're starting at 10 o'clock. We're not starting too early. We're finishing at 4:30. So that gives people time to sort of tidy up emails before and after the day. Each of these sessions is very clear. We know who's presenting it. We know how long it's going to take. We've got the objectives. We've got the outputs. We've got the approach. We've got the duration. So everybody knows what they're letting themselves in for. We've also got proper breaks, and that's very key. And one of the things I mentioned about make it fun is throughout the discovery, every day we focused on icebreaker tasks. So getting to know each other through a series of icebreakers in the introductions. Now, normally introductions might be quite quick, but we invested 45 minutes to go around everybody. We had people brought in a favorite photograph that, that's important to them. And we got to find out a bit of each other, and running icebreaker sessions where we would either get a question or a task before the break and come back a few minutes early to start, talking about the questions that might have been set. And it could be something like, go and bring something green back, or it could be a question, where are you desperate to go on holiday when we get back to normal? You can also see from this first day that there's a lot of focus on chartering and team chartering. We're not necessarily focusing just yet on actually solving the problem. We've got some vision statements there, but we're looking at culture. We're looking at team bonding missions and mission tests. And I really love the power of a future perspective, which is like a retrospective, but you're projecting into the future rather than dwelling on the past. And again, it was very successful. We have to focus on, in that 5 days, we achieved the decision to proceed, and we created artifacts around the vision, the product backlog, the story map, and lots of team chartering activities. So very conscious of time. We moved into the delivery phase, and how we did that, I'm so proud of the team. We had 6 developers, and this could have been quite complicated, but we still are using the concept of mobbing. Now, mobbing is a little bit like pair programming, where you've got a driver and a navigator, but in this particular instance, all 6 developers are working on the code base at the same time. Now, some people might think that doesn't sound efficient, but I can assure you it is efficient. The output is actually happening quicker, and quality is higher because everybody is working together. Nobody's writing defects. And the way mobbing works is the navigator and the driving roles rotate around the team. So everybody's getting involved. Everybody's getting to understand the code base. We also adapt how we talk to each other. So we have a 15-minute morning wave and afternoon wave. They're like generic water cooler online meetings where we're not talking about work and just getting a chance to decompress. We also don't wait to the end of the sprint boundary to do a show and tell. We do a show and tell to the product owner and the wider team and whoever's actually interested as soon as a feature is ready to be demonstrated. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of how we're adapting delivery of a brand new project to work remote. I'm going to talk about how we look after each other. And one of the favorite blogs I've read is from an ex-colleague called Gaz, which is all about how to work remotely. And it's summarized by saying, be patient, be kind, and wear pants, to describe the best ways to work online. So how we look after each other at Zuhlke, we started off by over-communicating. My role as regional director, in the first week, I was checking in with everybody every single day. And I think that was really important, but it's not sustainable for a long time. But what it's allowed us to do is just understand who was actually coping well with isolation, who was actually struggling with isolation. So as an organization, we're global, so we're used to working remotely, but nobody's used to the isolation that's sort of beset upon us. And that was really key, that we were able to sort of help each other. And it was only to start with, because what I loved about our organization is it naturally self-organized, where we were running virtual quizzes, just like everyone else, virtual quizzes, virtual pub nights, virtual coffees. My favorite is virtual fika, where it's coffee and cake. And it's key that we have these downtime, and that self-organizing of over communication really helped. Don't underestimate how important it is to have a solid ergonomic work environment. We had people just sitting on a chair, on their sofa. It's not comfortable to do that every day. So making sure people knew that they could just go and buy a desk or go and get a monitor and expense it, and just make sure that you're comfortable to be productive. It's also important to be transparent. I did have this was be reassuring, but I appreciate not everyone can be reassuring. Some companies are struggling. For us, it was important that our CEO, right from the outset, has been able to provide, regular, open, honest sessions to everybody. So the first thing he did, once lockdown was settled in, was just get a company-wide session and say, look, we're not at risk of furlough because of all these situations, and systematically just told everyone very openly and honestly why we're okay at the moment. But he was also very honest and said, well, this could change. There will be a recession after this, when we go back. So, for now, it's good, it's okay, but actually things might change. And what we've been able to do is make sure that we've got those weekly leadership sessions that everybody's involved with every week. And that's really important, because people have questions. So can we still do training? So absolutely, yes, we can still do training. That's really important. We need to be sustainable. That is key in terms of being sustainable. We have to appreciate that a lot of people are spending their life in Teams and Zoom meetings. So one of the things I like to do is to, if I am setting up a meeting, set it up for 5 past the hour or 35 minutes past the hour, not on the hour or half past. Just make sure that people have a bit of a decompression break so they can context switch before the next session. And also try and minimize who needs to be in anything. I feel like I'm almost, I am in back-to-back sessions so that other people don't have to be. So, if you're in a leadership position, please look after people. So be flexible. If somebody's late, don't care. If somebody's late, just deal with it and appreciate that they're probably being impacted by something else. So it's really important to be more patient. And one of the things I'm really proud of, Zuhlke, is we very quickly mobilized or accelerated our wellbeing program. So this week we've actually had 2 company-wide mental health and wellbeing sessions. That's just really helping people deal with the current situation. We're also looking at how we do mental health support for managers and mental health first aid. So this is really important for us. The final section for me, apologies if I'm talking too fast, is to look after yourself. So for me, it's important to find a routine. I'm not commuting, but I'm not going to give that time back to the organization. I'm going out for a run in the morning. I'm doing some exercise. I'm trying to start as close to 8:30 or 9 o'clock as possible. I'm trying to make sure that I'm logging off at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and not just absorbing what would have been commuting time into extra work time. So create a comfortable environment for yourself. Make sure you've got your music that you want, you've got your pets around you, you're just comfortable. That's key. I've touched on exercise. I think that's really keeping me sane, is going out for a run every morning or sometimes after work. And 2 other final techniques that I'm using to really help me is personal Kanban, which I'll talk about in a second, and the concept of equanimity. So personal Kanban, I've redacted my own personal Kanban board. And what you see here is this really manages my life, but it does it in a way where it stops any anxiety because I know what's going to happen. It's like a bit of an interactive to-do list, but it allows me to regularly reprioritize what I need to do. It keeps my work really visible, so I know what I should be doing or what I'm not doing, and allows me to sort of reprioritize constantly and continuously. It's also very clear that I've got a column called work in progress. Now, you can only do one thing at a time. Don't overload yourself. That's really key. So I build myself a to-do list of a day in progress. I've got responsibilities around delivery, development. We're creating a new office in Manchester. We're hiring people. I need to care about all these things, but I can only do one thing at a time, and personal Kanban really helps me. And the final thing for me today is equanimity. So this is a state of psychological stability and composure. Now, you might say, what the hell has that got to do with Agile Principles? A lot, actually. One of the favorite presentation I've seen at an Agile conference was by Catherine Kirk, who did a presentation on equanimity, saying that team happiness can be the worst metric, the worst thing for you to aim for. The whole concept was about, if you keep striving for team happiness, you are going to have disruption, you are going to have setbacks. And if you keep forcing yourself to work harder and harder to keep being happy and happy, it's not going to work. And I'm not going to be able to explain this as eloquently as Catherine, and I've got some links later on, but I visualize Catherine's presentation as, a bit of a roller coaster where we have ups and we have downs. It's good to be happy, there's euphoria, but actually, particularly in IT, where you have deadlines, it also brings depression and anxiety. So a little bit of a cliche, what we've got to do is we've got to flatten the curve. There still will be bumps, there still will be ups and downs, but we've got to make sure that we minimize those downs and actually minimize the ups. And we do that by, being realistic about what we can actually achieve. We're working in a different environment. It's hard to work by yourself if you're used to being in collaborative teams. It's hard to necessarily communicate on teams if you're used to sort of face-to-face communication. So be kind to yourself. Don't take on too much. Don't overcommit. Don't give back your commuting time. And actually, if anything, appropriate effort, appropriate the effort that you can expend based on your situation and your mental welfare. So I think the key thing is be kind to yourself and don't overcommit and don't over celebrate. So thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. Apologies if I overran or talked too quickly. When you get the slides of this, you'll be able to see these references in more detail. So I'm going to stop sharing now and go hand back to Michael. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much, Kev. That was fantastic. If I can ask Kev if you can go off camera for a while, and Lawrence, before you start presenting, can I just get confirmation that everyone can see on stage? Can you share your slides, please? Okay, for people who are watching this, could you please let me know in the chat function if you can now see Lawrence's slides? Yeah, okay, well, I will go off camera and leave it to Lawrence.
Great, thanks, Michael, for that check. Good to get that through. So the first thing I'd say is I reflected on how fortunate and privileged I am to work in a sector that's much less impacted by the health crisis that we're facing than many. And of course, my heart goes out to anyone working in sectors that are more greatly affected, and of course, the key workers that are so busy keeping us safe. In terms of Manchester Digital, I don't know how many people are working in digital and how many are looking to work in digital, but I'm sure there's a mixed crowd. Looking at the topic in front of us, Kevin has set the scene very, very well in terms of what the principles of Agile are, and the concern of centering around users and customers, a focus on the people who are delivering, and a huge focus on quality. I'll be looking at really the central topic of how the behaviors and actions of teams can be crucial in making Agile work at any time, and how that in particular is more stressed during a crisis. And what I do in my work is to help teams find the best way for them to work, whatever the circumstances. So what's a crisis? It's very easy, I've found, to see a crisis as something that's happening to you. It can become a very personal issue. But in really broad terms, it's more a fact of something that's happening around you. So to cope with that, it's very likely you're going to need very different monitoring, very different awareness of the things around you than you're used to in your daily work. This is something that I often hear people say, that we're firefighting. Well, my experience of firefighters is that they actually have a very strict routine, and they're quite comfortable in quite extreme circumstances. So firefighting can be quite a bad analogy. What certainly is a challenge in firefighting is having the right monitoring. And I did some work many years ago on the Buncefield fire. One of the major challenges there, and similarly in the Greek fires of 2007, was actually working out where the fire was, and that led to misdirection of resources and conflicts between teams that were very challenging. Of course, extreme circumstances, but it's a good reflection that if the circumstances around you change, you need to get a different way to tap into what's happening around you. The other major factor of a crisis is that you can be pretty sure that whatever you were doing before won't work. The extraordinary circumstances around you means that the control you're used to having of the impact of results from actions you take will be far less certain. So how do we start to approach these things? And as Kevin's outlined, how do we use some of the Agile tool set to help us? There are really three topics I'll cover today, and I'll mix these up depending on the exact circumstance I'm talking about. The first is purpose. It's absolutely crucial, and Agile works on this principle, to have very clear objectives. In a crisis, it's very easy to become reactive, and reaction is not itself working with purpose. Agile teams always ask, what do we want to achieve, not how do we want to react to this thing in front of us. Now, it's very likely that you won't nail the issue in the way that you're used to, but again, that's an Agile principle to say, this is our objective, what can we do to make a very small contribution to impact that objective. Routine is also very important, and Kevin has mentioned this, and I'll touch on this a bit later. But I'll start with a little story. I've spent quite a lot of time working with military organizations, and their approach to crisis and to routine is very revealing. On September the 11th, 2001, the HMS Kent, which is a frigate in the Royal Navy, was in Dubai preparing for exercises with friendly navies and diplomatic visits in that region. And in the evening, as is usual with these sort of exercises, the captain entertained the British ambassador and dignitaries from the region. 10 minutes after all the guests left, American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and we all know how much the world changed at that moment. On ship, within an hour, the ship was ready to defend itself from attack, which is something they trained to do. And recently I read some words from the commanding officer at the time, the Rear Admiral John Clink, and he said that the ship's company of 200 men and women with an average age of 23 slipped without fuss or fanfare into a watch-keeping routine of 6 hours on and 6 hours off. They remained like that for 7 months, which is an awful long time. And what the ship's company had done was draw on their training and create an instant routine that was actually familiar to them. In that way, in some ways, they put the crisis out of their minds. They were there to do a job, and they found a routine to do it. And what we found, and Kevin's mentioned this, is to find the routine that's right for you in the circumstances. One of the ways that we look to do that is by creating the right habits and thinking about whether the habits you've got are right for the circumstances. And I'll cover that a little bit more later. It's interesting to note that Agile was itself a response to a crisis. There was a shortage of skilled software engineers, and not just for that reason, projects were failing to meet the standards that they'd met historically. About 10 years after this, my company Engine adopted Agile to meet the very rapid changing environment that was in the internet and still is. And since then, we've used the same techniques outside of software and digital development in the wider workplace. And in the last couple of years, particularly, we've brought the principles of test and learn, which again I'll cover a little bit later, to a much wider part of our organization. And one of the ways that we do that is, as I mentioned a second ago, is by looking at the habits that teams form. And it can be very easy to form habits that are not productive and don't follow agile principles, which are all about productivity and getting the result that we need in the right way. So a framework that we developed when we were comparing where teams were successful in using Agile with those that were less successful in Agile was this set of 6 items. And to be clear, we looked at a number of cases as to where we were successful and where teams were less successful, and compared the habits that people had. And I'll look at these six factors in a bit more detail. We run those 6 factors as a workshop called 6 Habits, and here's an example of that, where the teams are comparing what they find works and what they find doesn't work in each of these areas. In Agile, that's often known as a retro, but this is, or retrospective, and this is a very specific way to do that, focused on getting the right habits for the circumstances that the project or the venture faces. So looking at each of these in a little bit more detail, the first that people often pick up in is communication, and it's interesting that to note that Kevin reflected that in a crisis, lots of teams say we need to communicate more, and they soon find that what they need to do is communicate right more than necessarily more. One of those that we've all had to take to is surviving without a location in this case. And of course, the loss of face-to-face means that we lose a lot of those face-to-face nuances. So use video is a great tip. It brings back as much of that as you can. Making sure that communication is right-sized, and again, an Agile principle, iterative. Tools like Slack give you a chance to put a much shorter comment and get a response from it. Again, in Agile terms, that follows a sort of test and learn principle around communication. And a piece of advice I've had for given to clients for many years is try to get off email. I don't think I probably need to push that point to this audience if it's a fairly digitally savvy audience. Finally, something that I'm always keen on, and we very often come to in this in a workshop on communication, is the benefits of publishing rather than sending out. Publishing, you use a wiki or something like that, and you publish a link. That means that you can account for people's time shifting. They can look at that and come back to it. And if you've updated the content, then they'll see the latest version rather than getting a repeated set of emails to say, oh, I missed something, here's something else. And finally, I read a blog from someone who is in the marketing communications area, and they said, you know, these are tough times, and it's really hard to be pushing stuff out and feeling that nobody's looking at it. And that occurs the same inside teams. A bit of communication, a huge part of communication is knowing that it's received. So use your thumbs up, just like Facebook and others use it on Slack. Learn to use the emoji if you have to on an email, but just give people that little bit of recognition that you've noticed what they've said, and that makes a huge difference. You'll find it does to you when somebody notices what you've said. The second habit is collaboration, and here's a golden tip, hugely simple. Anyone working in development of digital services, or indeed development of anything, is missing their post-it notes, and the magic of screen share we're all learning to use increasingly, and it can be so simple. If you bring up a Word document or even a spreadsheet, and you allow people to see that, then as they speak, you can type, and everyone can see what you're typing and what everyone else is saying. Gives an immediate visual record of what's being said. If you go one step further and you share that document using SharePoint or whatever platform it is you're using, then other people can edit that document along with you, and there you're into collaboration, and that can change the dynamic of a rather static video call into people actually collaborating. And I do this all the time at the moment. That sort of immediate interaction gives the potential replacement, Kevin mentioned this as well, of the water cooler moment, the potential for an unexpected interaction of two people editing the same thing or commenting on a cell in a spreadsheet even, and that allows a response. I was actually editing a spreadsheet that someone asked me to look at a couple of days ago, and someone was trying to contact me and they'd failed to get me on Slack. And they actually put a comment in the spreadsheet to say, hey, can you look at this? And that was an extraordinary moment of seeing how that works. Kevin has mentioned pair working, and if you can use some of those tools, you're getting close to remote pair working, and that's probably something we're all discovering. So I won't cover that in more detail. Prioritization, I've already mentioned the need to get your objectives right. And in a crisis, you need to be ruthless on priorities. Check them against your objectives. And as much as anything, priorities are about what you don't do. And even more so in a crisis, the ruthlessness you need to take tough choices on actions you can't take because they're just not important enough right now. To be speed, to be as fast as you can. Always prioritize with what you know. It's very easy to find that you haven't taken a decision to do something because you don't have enough information. Well, that's the situation we're in. At the same time, working out what's important and what is urgent is another way to help you find those priorities. The final thing that we often come across when we're in the workshop on priorities is people naming priorities that are actually too large. And again, an agile principle is to work incrementally, and you can work with this with priorities and actions, keep breaking down the priority and the action into smaller and smaller things, and find what the thing that you can do is. Never leave a prioritization meeting without something to do. And if you can't find something to do, find a smaller thing to do. It's a great tip. Ownership is something that Agile has got some very strong opinions on, and sometimes you can stick to those with a product owner or a service owner, and sometimes you can't. What's certainly the case in a crisis is that it's no time for strict hierarchies. You want to avoid a crisis become either a chaos or a game of waiting for someone in a hierarchy to decide. And we've seen this up front and center with the work of Chris Whitty, pushed right to the front, and quite rightly so, as an expert owner in the area of infectious diseases. And the politicians have stepped aside to let the right expert come forward, albeit a reluctant one. I have colleagues that know Chris quite well, and he's not someone that wants to be pushed into the center stage, but he's clearly the right person to do it. Finally, if that is the case, you're pushing forward someone that isn't necessarily comfortable being a leader. Make sure they have the support from the hierarchy that does exist. Authority becomes a role of support rather than necessarily taking all the actions. Capacity is something, this is a really interesting topic that we come across in the workshop. The immediate thing that people say with capacity is, how can I learn to do more? Well, as again, Kevin's highlighted, we're all doing a lot more, and here's a bit of homeschooling that many of us are facing. Check your pace during capacity, during a crisis. Again, Kevin's mentioned this, slow down. The heartbeat of someone under pressure can fool you into thinking you need to go fast. Again, Kevin's mentioned very eloquently avoiding working from home, drifting into long hours. But my key message from capacity is don't make it about how to do more. And again, I think fully support Kevin's position on that. Consensus. Now, I wanted to get to this because it's a really good example of some complex remote working. So the image here shows a screenshot from a tool that we use called Miro. And here in the good old days of meeting face to face, people put some ideas on a whiteboard with post-it notes and printing. In the circumstances we were in, that was taken into a panoramic shot, put onto screen, and on screen, the little green dots are a bit of voting. And then above that, they've put digital post-it notes to identify additional comments. So here we're sort of combining the real world. And these tools are all about sharing the purpose and making sure that things are visible. Getting quiet voices out is important in any workshop, and no less difficult in the circumstances we're in. Take time on critical decisions. Building consensus is about asking for agreement, not hoping that when you put your view forward, the silence and everyone's agreed by default. And something I learned in negotiation training is to ask for agreement very specifically. It's a great way of gaining consensus, or if you haven't got it, finding out the problems you've got. So Agile is certainly something that's become a widespread movement, and really what I'm sharing here is that you can use Agile-like techniques without going the full range of into Agile by the book, as it were. This is Manchester Digital, so I'm sure you're familiar with some of the online tools, but I've given you some tips to use them, perhaps in a crude way, but to get things done. It's crucial to have priorities and try to do just one thing if you're struggling for working out what to do. And finally, Kevin and I both put this message down: pace yourself, and when you've done something, give yourself a list, and that hugely pleasurable task with whatever tool you use of putting a little tick in a box and saying, well, I've done that. I'll leave you there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Hi again, Kev. So thank you very much for that, both of you. I took an absolute stack load of notes there. The biggest piece of advice I got was to slow down, which I'm looking forward to doing this bank holiday and taking a rest. And yeah, definitely trying to take some of that commute time back and use that for myself to do more with. So there's not been any questions come in yet. Oh, here we go. Here's one. So do you think Agile organizations are better suited to crisis management? I'll offer that one out to Lawrence.
I would say so, yes, quite definitely. And the reason is really for the example that I gave in the military story, and Kevin supported this as well. Agile really is about making sure that a routine is simple and repeatable. And with that, you can really let the routine turn the handle and focus on what do we really need to do. And crisis is always about what you really need to do. I worked on quite a substantial crisis in a data loss, a cyber situation, and it was really, really important to recognise. In fact, that's in the situation. What the best thing to do was to stand back, put our hands up, and say, "Okay, we're not touching anything because we don't want to start to confuse the threads that are left in the data trail." And our action to do that was while some other experts came in and helped. So giving that sort of sense of priority is a huge part of Agile.
Fantastic. Kev?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's not just about adapting to change. It's just expecting change, accepting that change will happen. And if you have a culture of retrospectives and continuous learning, continuous improvement, then you're going to be ready for it. So I do get a little bit fed up when people say this is unprecedented. It's actually not. You know, we've been through the banking crisis in 2008. A lot of organizations just didn't adapt then. So what we're going through now, you know, is we have seen similar situations before in terms of how organizations are coping.
Brilliant. Natasha's follow-on question now I'll offer to you, Kev. Will you be rushing back to the old normal in your organisation, or will you continue with some of what you're doing currently?
This is a daily discussion, actually. It's about, you know, particularly it's one of these or water cooler conversations we're having regularly, which is what's working actually really well and what are we going to keep doing when we go back to the new normal. So for me, yeah, there's lots of ways. So I wasn't really good at working from home. I didn't like it. I didn't like being away from everyone, but actually this is really helping my work-life balance. So for me and my family, there's definitely going to be more home working, and it's definitely not going to go back to sort of Northern Rail or Transpennine Express every single day.
What about you, Lawrence?
Yes, so very early on, as it happens, when we left our offices for a trial of remote working, we discovered we never went back, because the very next day the embargoes were put in place. And one of the reasons that we left the office is we were actually redeveloping it. We were changing our layout, and the changes that we were making was more of cafe style desks and shared desks, and podiums for people to stand out and work at. So I think this is a one direction change, or a direction of travel rather, and a positive one. There's no doubt that people want the face-to-face interaction, and there are things that we're seeing that are missing, but we've called out already that we want to make more use of some of the tools that some of us have been using for a number of years.
Fantastic. And I've got a question. If an organisation was considering adopting working in an agile fashion, what advice would you give them, bearing in mind we're going into a very uncertain world at the minute? Would you tell them to do that now, or to hold off and see what the new normal looks like? Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, it's the apologies. You're going to get the consultant answer of it. It depends. It depends on the size of the organization. It depends what you achieve. I think for me, the main thing would just be to do it iteratively, do it in an agile way, which is don't go big bang and try and impose agile on everyone. Take it slowly. Do it in one part of the organization. Iterate, learn before you take it to the wider organization.
And Lawrence, following on from that, Rachel's asked, do you have any tips for encouraging leaders and managers to take on an agile approach? So how can people who fancy a bit of this manage up?
So it's a fascinating question, and we developed some training to bring agile internal to our organisation to areas that have not worked agile at all. They've had quite a strict process-based delivery method, and something that we found was important. We found that there were 3 levels of agile. The first is agility, simple business agility, to say, wait a minute, can we be flexible? Can we make choices in a different way? The second is agile working, which you can't see it, but we write it with a small a. And the final is agile with a capital A, and that's agile software, where actually there are a fair number of rules that are well developed and you want to work with. So what we ask everyone to reach for is agility, using a little bit of agile, dipping your toe in the water, just as Kevin says, and we find that encouraging management teams to do that, to say, can we make a small trial of something rather than insisting on a business plan, having a big proposal for a huge venture? Can we test and learn with something small? And if you put that proposal forward and find perhaps crucially a supporter in that senior team to recognize it, and that could be someone who works in software that knows the value of that technique, then you're starting to do a little bit of agility or a little bit of agile.
Great, thank you. And just a quick one.
Can I give an answer for that one as well? Just apologies, Mike. Which is,
of course you can.
We're very fortunate in Manchester, where there's an amazing collaborative agile community. So if it's you want to take that first step, come along to one of the many meetups like Deliver Sessions or Lean Agile Manchester. Go to a conference like DeliverConf that you guys set up there in Agile Manchester, in a digital Manchester Digital. So the community is vibrant and really collaborative and really sharing in Manchester. There's lots of support there.
Fantastic. And just a quick one for you again, Kev. Mohammed's asked, with regards to personal Kanban, can you recommend any free tools for personal use, and which is your favourite?
Trello.
That's nice, short and sweet. So if you've not tried the networking before, I do encourage you to stick around and give it a go. If you look at the tab on the far left, click into networking. We're going to enter into a chat roulette style gamble when you'll be paired with someone to have a little chat with. If you're really lucky, you might get Lawrence and Kev. If you're very unlucky, you'll get me. We'll see how we go. So thanks a lot, everyone. We will be emailing out a roundup for this. That'll include the video and also some bits of content from Kev and Lawrence as well. So thank you very much. Bye now.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.